Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. And you know, the show has just started, and I'm already seeing some messages that gives me a smile. I read it on Common Dreams and was like, wow. And here Bridge MCP points it out. Scientific American magazine backs Joe Biden, that's first presidential endorsement in its 175 days. Welcome aboard, Bruce Pollard. Welcome aboard, Bridge MCP. Welcome aboard, AVQ. Michael Rudnin, great seeing you guys. Michael, yes, AVC7. Donald Trump, climate change, wildfires. I'm telling you, brother, I'm telling you. Trump is making a public policy based on wrong-headed ideas that fly in the face of scientific consensus, appointing loyal sycophants who would dismantle the agencies to which they were appointed. But it's not only that, brothers and sisters, they're even so dangerous. Paulette Stansel, welcome aboard. Hey, we have a great show for you today. We have the president of Demos. In the middle of the show, we're going to play the president of Demos. I had a real great conversation with him, so we're going to play that one a little bit later. We have also, look, I tell you what, let's get the show started, and then I'm going to get into my rant. And because after I read this article, I had to say, you know, we have to get serious about putting our message out. And, you know, we are so concentrated so many times in how the other side is doing certain things a certain way that sometimes we don't look in the mirror and realize as well that we ought to be a part of the problem as well, that we not have to be, that we are in fact a part of the problem as well, because we allow these people to get away with the things they get away with. So anyhow, folks, if you're just joining us, please share the program on your wall, share the program in your spaces, share the program on your Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, everywhere, so that people can get this info that we all talk about all of the times. Anyhow, title of the show today, if I can get to the title of the show today, and let me as well bring that up on the screen. Title of the show is Documented Theft by 1%. Demos President K. Sabeel Rahman discusses power. The richest 1% of Americans have let me stop there, because Tank 28, one of my favorite right-wingers that visit us every day. You know, I love you, Tank 28, but you're wrong. Peace in the Middle East, baby. Trump, no. Read the undertones and read the fine print. Remember, Trump had an idea by sending his son-in-law out there. What's his name? His son-in-law out there. And the son-in-law failed. But these guys have always wanted to come to some sort of an agreement, financial that is, because again, it's all about the mighty dollar. Well, I say the mighty dollar, mighty money. Kushner, thank you, brother, Kushner. It's all about the money. Do you think the real Israeli care anything about religion? Do you think the real Omani or the real Arab Emirates care about religion? Do you think any of these guys care about anything other than making money? Do you think the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia cares about religion for real? Come on, man. Let's be clear. All the leaders of this country, they use religion, they use racism, they use all the isms as a tool to maintain power. So Saudi Arabia allow these terrorists to run around. As long as they're terrorizing other people, they're welcome here. Al Qaeda was in Saudi Arabia and these other places under the consent of the government because they weren't against him. So let's understand what's going on here. When you talk about, oh, the Jews fighting the Muslims and Islam, this and that's just the peons. Only the peons worry about those things. The reality is money speaks, baby. And they will use religion and everything else to monopolize in power. Just like Donald Trump is using the evangelicals right now. You have Netanyahu using the Jews, the Hasidic Jews, and all these other very conservative Jews. That's who Netanyahu uses. And the guys from Oman and the guys from Saudi Arabia and the guys from OEA, all of them, that OAE, all they do is they use their religious fanatics so that they can keep control. So when you see this big signature and all that stuff, that was Netanyahu helping Donald Trump to look like a leader with the expectation that it'll help him in the election. Unfortunately, unlike Tank 28, who is a very smart person, who understands foreign policy, who knows, who have interest in foreign policy, etc., most Americans don't. Most Americans don't care anything about Palestine or Jew or Israel. They don't care. They want to know when they can get the other piece of bread. That's why bread and circus work in America. Now, what we are trying to do, including you, Tank, is have Americans more interested in things of substance because these things of substance materially affect their daily lives. And we have to impress on them that reality because right now our schools don't do it. We no longer teach civics. We no longer do any of those things. And by not doing any of those things, we have a population that is apathetic. We have a population that doesn't give a damn. We have a population that have allowed themselves to be screwed. And that's what we're going to talk about in the first article. So let's go ahead and talk about what the program is about. Documented grand theft by 1%. Thank you for giving me the tangent, Tank 28. Like I tell all of you guys, this show belongs to you. So everything that you say, if it catches my eye, you are going to actually make sure that I address it. But anyway, let's continue. Documented grand theft by 1%. Dimas President K. Sabeel Rahman discusses power. The richest 1% of Americans have taken $50 trillion from the bottom 90% in the recent decades. K. Sabeel Rahman from Dimas, he joins us. We're going to have some fun with that. Okay, the 1% has legally stolen from the poor and the middle class. Before we talk down to the right as being gullible, many of us will do well to look in the mirror, myself included. All of us look in the mirror. We are all complicit because of our mental laziness and our willful ignorance. We all share that complicity. And it's something that together we all have to break out of ourselves, and we all have to promote that others break out of it as well, because it is consistently used against us. Let me give an example. I am all in for voting for Biden. I am all in for voting for Biden, okay? I am. But deep inside, and I'm going to really, for those people who just can't see their way to do it, I'm going to be trying, hey, no, you got to do this because, it's existential for the country. But too many times after we do the incremental thing, we don't realize that we have much more to do and do it. Okay? And that is where I am, and that is what I'm trying to get across, and that's what I'm going to try to get across with this message as well. So continuing. Journalist John Young's essay expresses a key difference that make the Trump tapes worse than the Nixon Watergate tapes. The president of Dimas, a progressive think tank, visits with us with an important message. And then why does the president love dictators? I just want to play a little clip later on, probably do it at the end of the show. But anyway, let's go ahead and get busy with that article. The article states as follows. 2.5. Let's see. Jacoby J said, "Man, Egberto, it's hard for me to vote for him. Love Bernie, that hurt. Just so hard to vote for." Look, brother, I don't only love Bernie's policies, Jacoby G. I was also I was also a delegate for Bernie Sanders in 2016, and I went to Philly. I did my job. I went on, I stayed behind the doors at the committees, etc. But I understand what we have to do, and Jacoby G, we need you. In fact, I need Masticator to vote progressive this time around as well. I need Tank 28 to do the same. I'm asking my right wingers to go into that booth. You don't have to tell anybody who you vote for, Masticator or Tank 28. You just have to go out there and do it, and know that it's a better move for you in the long run. You can go ahead and get conservative after you make that vote again. I mean, actually, what you should do is get my book to see what I talk about when I talk about, hey, just vote your interests and keep your party and keep your whatever ideological slant you want to call yourself. Just vote in your interests. That's all we're asking for. Vote in your interests. Anyhow, let me put that on the screen. It's on the screen. $2.5 trillion theft study shows richest 1% of Americans have taken $50 trillion from the bottom. The median U.S. worker salary would be around twice as high today if wages kept up with economic output since World War II, new research revealed. Yeah, if it kept up with economic output, but it's even deeper than that, right? Americans have become very productive. We've created robots. And notice what I've said. We have created robots. Are you working in a restaurant as a waiter or waitress? Are you doing what many people would consider a menial job? You know what? You pay taxes. These taxes were invested in schools, etc. And guess what? Those schools invented robots, and they made it possible for robots to be there. But you know what? It is very, very interesting. It is very interesting because every American, right or left, you are all responsible for the great amount of progress we've made in this country, the productivity. And in doing so, you've taken jobs away from yourself because of our current economic structure. I'm going to tie that into this story in a minute. New research published today, and they linked to the new research in there, Monday found that the top 1% of U.S. income earners have taken $50 trillion from the bottom 90% over the last several decades, and that median worker salary would be around twice as high today if it as it was in 1945. Pay had kept pace with economic output, but it's actually deeper. Again, like I said, productivity has increased. We've created robots. We have created all kinds of things that make, machines that make things better, not aren't necessarily robots. That's a lot. The study authors, Carter Price and Edwards of the Rand Corporation, examined income distribution and economic growth in the United States from 1945 to the present. The researchers found stark differences between income distribution from 1945 to 74 and 75 to 2018. And I can tell you, 75 for 2018 really accelerated in 1980 when Reagan brought in Reaganomics, something that first Bush called voodoo economics. In effect, it was a legal theft of the middle class. According to the study, which was funded by Seattle-based Fair Work Center, the median salary of a full-time U.S. worker is currently around $50,000, adjusted for inflation using the Consumer Price Index, or below the current median income, now less than half of what they would have been if incomes had kept pace with growth. This means that if salaries had kept pace with economic growth, the median worker pay would be around $92,000 and $102,000 today, depending on how inflation is calculated. But whether they use, there are two ways of there's a sort of inflation that they don't use what total cost is, but they use what a basket is. And if that basket means changing the products in that basket, I forgot what they call it. It's not. It's core. There's core inflate. I forgot what it's called. Anyway, I'll think about it soon. Anyway, had the more equitable distribution of roughly 30 years post-war period continued pace, the total annual income of the bottom 90% of American workers would have been $2.5 trillion higher in 2018. Think about it. 2.5 times or $2.5 trillion more, about equal to 12% of the American GDP. In other words, the upward redistribution of income has enriched the 1% by some $47 trillion if you amortize that over that period since 1975, which would be now more than $50 trillion at the expense of who? The American worker. And that is what we have to get in our heads. We are all, even those of us who are, many of us look at our right-wing brothers, right? Right-wing brothers and sisters, and we tell them, go to the blog for the show today, Michael Rudden, and just click on the article point. I have a bullet point for the article. So if you take a look, right, folks, when they complain about us taxing them to death, it's crap. We are trying to tax back what we earned that was never given to us. That is what we're trying to tax back. And, you know, earlier writings that I used to do, I was a lot more aggressive. I was about confiscation. But now I understand that, you know, that doesn't sound very nice to a lot of people. They don't understand that, you know, it was stolen from you in a very nice fashion. It must be taken back in a very nice fashion. Unfortunately, a lot of people have lost their homes, their lives, and otherwise for this legalized theft. What I call, you know, you've heard me talk a lot about antiseptic slavery. There's also antiseptic theft, right? And this is antiseptic theft. We take your money, but you don't really realize that we're taking it away from you. We just think, oh, you're so nice when you gave me that raise, sir. You gave me that 1% raise, but the income of the company increased by 20%, and I got 1% raise, and I'm supposed to sit back and be happy that the excess labor that I gave to you, you're not giving back to me. And it's not even asking you for something that I didn't earn. I created it. You created it. All this, every time you hear people talk about companies' profitability, when they talk about companies' efficiency, when they talk about productivity, it isn't the CEO of the company that's generating that reality, what's happening. It is you. And what we have, even those on the left who want to be as progressive, and we want to have Medicare for all, and we want to have people with their kids having the kids having a place to stay while we go to work, daycare, and we want all these good things that a good society is supposed to have. And it's almost, when you look at that, it's almost like saying we just want the crumbs. Even some of that is the crumbs. Because we have not come to the realization in this country who really has the power and who really generates the economy. You know, and this has been from the instantiation of this company, of this country, from the time this country had begun. We have not paid those who actually made this country. We just look at those at the top who say something. Okay, pick the cotton. Grow the corn, take care of the chickens. You know, there were several, if you go to Netflix, you can look at several instances of programs on those farmers who take care of chickens, right? And actually, MMT is what we do need, masticators here. You're not going to make any fun of me that way. In fact, masticator, if I want you to, I did an interview for my book, and I talked about listening to people very in detail. I would love to have a one-on-one conversation with you, and for you to tell me everything you believe about the economic system, our economic system. I would like, masticator, I would love to have a conversation with you, and I'd listen to you. I promise I would listen to absolutely everything you have to say about how you believe an economic system works. And then I will ask you again to listen to what I have to say in response to you. I may learn something from what you have to say in your belief on an economic system, but you should have your mind open to learn or to be able to digest what I'm saying as well. And it goes as follows. And I want everybody here to ask themselves the question, because the story, I don't really have to read the rest of the story. It's a very long story, gives some incidentals, etc. But the basic thing is the basic tenet of the story is they stole from us because we do the work, we take the risks with our bodies, with our minds, with everything else. And the people who are the bastion of capital, they take it all. They take it most. And that is because that's the way capitalism was designed by the creators of the country. And that is the way they decide that they wanted things to run. And then they also created a counter narrative that please explain to me what's making it embarrassing why should I be embarrassed, Masticator? I would like to know, why should I be embarrassed for the statement that I just made? What is it that doesn't add up? Explain that to me, please. I'm listening. But anyhow, and you can call in, by the way. You can actually call in. But anyhow, please tell me, where is it that I'm wrong? But so what we are trying to say here, folks, is the following. We do need some sort of a hierarchical structure, because everybody is not an engineer. Everybody doesn't know how to do math well. Everybody doesn't know all these different things. But what does everybody do? Everybody works. And I could not live without having somebody who takes my garbage out. If I had to do that myself, if I had to find a place where to put it, whatever, I couldn't do the things that I want to do. When I developed my software company and the different pieces of software that I wrote, if there weren't other people doing other things, I could not have completed the job. If I hadn't have all Americans paying taxes, the good school where I got my education to become a darn good engineer, I would not have had that, because they are responsible for being the funders of that. One of the reasons that I've always felt one has to give back is because of how many people have put in. I mean, if it's the person that you consider the lowest on the totem pole, the person that we've been taught to believe is the lowest on the totem pole, many times what they've given to society is so much more. So that is a story that I wanted to tell, including to our folks on the left. We are more egalitarian than our right-wing brothers and sisters. But we are not sufficiently egalitarian. We still allow a neoliberal plutocracy to really take more from society at large, and we are also their conduit for hurting others. And what we have to do internally, what we have to do at the ballot box, is first elect the people that are finally going to get us to a location where we can then start to realize. I mean, Biden gets elected, but after Biden gets elected, our next goal isn't Biden. Our next goal is to get a very young Bernie Sanders running. Somebody who understands that it's people first. But Biden is the only step we have so far, because we as progressives didn't complete the job. Myself, all of us. Completing the job would have meant winning. And yes, you can talk about headwinds and all of that. That is true. But you can go ahead and continue. Masticator says your fever dreams of history are entirely based on a fog of lies. Wow, that sounds pretty, Masticator. I actually like the way that sounds. You embarrass yourself when you arrogantly repeat these dreams and lies in a public forum. Enumerate the lies for me. Let me go ahead and play the person today that we have for today. And I ask you a favor. Please enumerate the lies that I've told. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play Mr. Rahman right now. And for when we get back, please have the lies enumerated so that all of our listeners can see all these lies that I've been actually saying. So let's go ahead and do that, Mr. Masticator, and then we'll take it from there. Here we go with El Señor Richest Rahman. Welcome to one more edition of Politics on Radar. Egberto Willis, your host. I am here with Sabeel Rahman. He's the president of Demos and Demos Action, a law professor at Brooklyn Law School, co-chair of the Law and Political Economy Project, and the author of several books, including the one that I love just by the name, Civic Power. Civic Power. Rebuilding American Democracy in an Era of Crisis. Sabeel Rahman, how are you doing today, my friend?
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Look, it's great having you. I really love the organization for which you are the president of. Why don't you tell me a little bit about Demos first? Because I think Americans hear about all these different organizations that are out there, but they are not all the same. Tell us a little bit about Demos, very important organization.
Absolutely, no, super appreciate that. So Demos, we think of ourselves as a think and do tank focused on racial equity, democracy reform, and economic inequality. And for us, what that means is if you look all around us and see the crisis that this country is in, that crisis is not just about, who we vote for every 2 or 4 years. It's also about those deeper policies and frankly, ideologies that inform those policies that got us to this place, right? And so as a think tank, what we're doing is we're thinking about what are those policy ideas that we need to create a racially equitable, inclusive democracy? How do we then bring those ideas into reality by writing about them, working with folks who are policymakers, bringing litigation in key states, working with grassroots partners across the country to advocate for these ideas. So it's really many different tools, but the thrust of our work is about building an inclusive, equitable democracy and the role that ideas play in making that happen.
Now, how old is your organization?
So Demos is we're just a little over 20 years old. We were founded in 2000, right after in the aftermath of the Bush v. Gore election, and now 20 years later, the crisis of American democracy is even more apparent for everyone to see.
Now, look, after the election of President Obama, everybody thought we were a post-racial society. Everybody thought we were going to sing Kumbaya. We've overcome all the bad beginnings, if you will, of this country. I mean, we had that feeling, and it didn't last but probably 6 months or so, and then we got into this. Now, you wrote a book called Civic Power: Rebuilding American Democracy in an Era of Crisis. I have always come to the conclusion that a lot of the problems that we have, first of all, it comes from above. In other words, if we are fighting among each other, we can't be looking at the root causes of our problems, which for all practical purposes has much to do with the economic system we have, with the type of hierarchy that we have. All those things can be combined in one. Civic knowledge, understanding civics is a necessity to mitigate this all. Why don't you tell me that in the context of your book? And folks, I want you all to get this book as well, because it'll teach you something about how we should operate as a society. Go ahead, my friend.
No, I appreciate that. And so, when my co-author, Holly Rusin-Gilman, and I set out to write the book, part of what we wanted to argue against we want to argue for what a democracy really requires. And the thing that we're trying to argue against is this sort of the thin notion that, well, actually, if you just elect the right person, or we show up to vote every couple of years, that's good enough, right? And of course, that's critically important, especially now. November is very soon.
Right.
We're really concerned about voter turnout this election, given the pandemic and the crisis. And so I do want to ensure that we talk about that. But elections, including this one in November, is really just step one in a much deeper project of making democracy work. And the problems of our democracy go much deeper, as you were saying. They're really structural. It's that we have a political system that is not designed to include and respond to the most affected frontline communities. You think about how many Black and Brown communities, workers are actually in our elected positions of authority, right? What would the Fed look like, for example, if instead of Wall Street bankers and economists, it was actually governed by folks who had student debt, credit debt, who are workers in Black, Brown, and immigrant communities? That you would make different policy if the institution was built that way. And so what we're trying to do in the book is to try to say, okay, we got to get out of this crisis we're in right now. Part of that is showing up to vote, but what happens after the election? Let's actually pursue the policies that build much more inclusive, responsive, accountable institutions, and that build the kind of grassroots organizations that we need to use those institutions effectively.
Now, you know what is interesting, right? Is a lot of folks don't quite understand that you know, you talk policy and you talk economy, you talk the way things are currently. What a lot of people don't understand is all these things are human made, and as
Totally.
human
Totally.
made, they can be changed from an economic system to a political system. And when you get to the point where you think people before some standard or some status, that is how you move things forward. Now, how do we start? Because, I mean, we've been at this a long time, Sabeel, a very long time.
Yeah.
Uh, how do we start to build within people that they do have the power to do what we know have to get done? I mean, I really want you to put it in the context of civic power again, because that is what many of us really don't understand.
Yeah, I think the it's such a great question because I think we become habituated to this powerlessness, right? Things are happening to us. We look around and we think, well, how can we gain control over, you know, the pandemic, the economic collapse, these politicians who are, you know, not responding to what our communities need, and that powerlessness is itself a human creation because it serves the interests of big corporations, of elected officials to keep a monopoly on economic and political power. And so what we want to try to say in our work at Demos and in the book is that we can reclaim our power as communities, as members of the democracy. And it really takes a couple of things. Number one, it means working with collectives, collective action, thinking about the importance of grassroots organizing, community organizing, civil society groups, you know, everything from community groups to labor unions, right? These are ways that we can have more collective power than we can have as individuals. That's number one. Number two is just realizing what you were saying, that a lot of the things that we take as just this is the way the world is, that it doesn't have to be this way. Actually, we could cancel student debt, right? We could have an energy policy that responds to climate change. We could have a democratic system that actually, where every vote actually counts and is treated fairly instead of having the kind of voter suppression that we have. We could make those changes if we want to. And then the third piece is we actually need to have different institutions. So Congress needs to run differently. Our local bodies at the city level and the state level can be more participatory, right? And so that change can happen even in our own communities as well as at the national level. So it's really, I mean, that's a lot to do, but I think for me, I find it empowering to realize that individually we might feel powerless, but collectively, when we join with one another and we actually make the bold demands, we can and have in the past changed this country.
Now, you use the word a lot, collectively, which is so important, but to work collectively also demands a certain democracy.
Yeah.
And to get to some of the points that we were that we're going to talk about, one of the points is the right to the vote and to ensure that your vote counts. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you know, one of the big things that we work on at Demos is defending the right to vote, especially for Black and Brown communities. Right, you mentioned the historical roots of the challenges that we're in. You know, one of the hard realities about American democracy is that for much of it, from the founding, really, it has been built to be an exclusionary democracy. Right, the vote was not for all of us. Right.
Sabir, that is such
Yeah,
an, I mean, that is such an important realization. When America was founded, only 5% of the people qualified to vote. And
absolutely.
we have this fallacy that this is this great democracy, this people place where we always had one person, one vote. Expand on that, because I think when people learn the truth about that, it makes them more apt for change.
Yeah, it's well, and the story of that is actually a story about collective action and pressure making a different reality, right? So at the start of the country, the vote was really limited to white male property owners, and over time, it was because of the pressure from grassroots or social movements to expand the vote, expanding the vote to outside of the property owning class. Then we passed a constitutional amendment, the 19th Amendment, to enfranchise women. We had to fight a civil war and pass the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to create the kind of constitutional equality for Black Americans, right, to actually, and part of that was the right to vote. And I often tell people the story that, the high watermark of Black political power, electoral political power, for a long time was in those first few years after the Civil War. You saw
Right.
really, really
Reconstruction.
high during Reconstruction, exactly, because you had this constitutional change and you had, and it was being enforced on the ground and in the courts. And it's only because of a backlash by, that's when you see the KKK and the rise of paramilitary white nationalist forces with allies in the states and in the Congress, who literally fought a counter-revolution to suppress the Black vote.
Sabeel, it's important what you've just noticed there with the backlash as well, because in 2009 we went through the same kind of a thing as well with a backlash. But I think more importantly, what you're alluding to is that democracy isn't a static thing. It's something that has to be continuously nurtured, because if you think you're going to we're post this and post that, now we can sit down and go have a cup of coffee and just let it be. It's something that always needs to be worked on. You want to expand on that?
Absolutely, yeah. And I so agree with your critique of the post-racial kind of discourse of after 2008, right? Because what we've seen is exactly proves your point that look, it will always be profitable for some people to break democracy, right? Because it's much easier to hoard wealth, profits, political control if you don't have a functioning democracy. And so if we believe in democracy, part of that has to be the continual fight to defend and advance democratic ideas. It doesn't just happen. And so, when we look at what's happening even right now with the 2020 election coming upon us, this is a street fight for our democracy all the way down. We're seeing, local officials trying to even weaponize the pandemic to try to drive down voter turnout, right? Closing polling places in majority Black and brown neighborhoods as a way to reduce turnout for people who might, vote a different way from the people in power. And, first of all, that's morally evil. But second of all, it just shows the point that the vote is powerful. If it weren't powerful, they wouldn't try so hard to keep it from us. And it has to be, and that power has to be fought for and defended so that we actually can use it.
I want to go on a little tangent. Now that we're talking the vote and the power of vote and the power of democracy, I just want to get your thoughts on this, because it's something that's been bothering me all along.
Yeah.
I've been saying that the country has been moving into a wanting of more democracy, but what we've seen with a Senate that has confirmed a lot of anti-democratic type justices, that we are setting the country up to be run by a minority.
Yes.
And with the help of a judiciary. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. We sort of have under the guise of a democracy, what we actually have is minority rule and a setup for minority rule for a long time to come. So if you think about the Supreme Court, for example, but also the lower courts after this administration, one of the consistent patterns of Trump and also George W. Bush appointees is a hostility to voting rights, right? It was during the Obama years that the Roberts Court ruled on Citizens United, opening the floodgates of big money, ruled on this important case, Shelby County, which actually gutted the Voting Rights Act. That was the product of the civil rights movement, right? One of the civil rights movement victories. And it's because of those decisions that actually now it's much easier for Governor Kemp in Georgia, for example, to purge 300,000 Black and brown voters from the rolls in an election that he won in 2018 by 55,000, right? And so we have rampant voter suppression, in part enabled by the courts. We also now have a Senate, which, the Senate was always designed, to your earlier point, that we weren't founded as a democracy. The Senate was always designed as a sort of elite aristocratic check on popular accountability. But that problem is getting worse and worse when you think about now with the filibuster and with the fact that every state gets 2 senators. The reality is that a very small fraction of the country's population has a veto on all legislative decision making. So that is not democracy, right? Um, it's one of the big reasons why, even in this pandemic, we don't have a response for people who are struggling to pay the bills or to keep a roof over their heads. The House has passed multiple recovery bills and emergency relief bills. It's the Senate that's sitting on those bills, right? And you know, there's wildfires now happening in California. Uh, if we didn't have an electoral college where that separates us into safe states and swing states, you know, do we really think that if the president thought that he had to win California's votes, that he would let California burn? No,
He
right?
hasn't even mentioned it.
He hasn't even mentioned it because he knows that he can't win California, and he knows that he doesn't have to win California
Or
in order
or
to stay
or
in office,
Oregon.
or Oregon or Washington. And
Right.
like we have a system that actually incentivizes elected officials like the president to actively ignore and harm huge swaths of the country, geographically and demographically, right? And so now I've gone on a tangent a little bit here, but your point is well taken that, you know, when you add all of this up, we have minority rule and we have a president and a party in power that has optimized a strategy for minority rule, right? They're not running to be, he's not running to be president of the whole country. He's running to be president of the 35% of extreme far right, white nationalist, white supremacist voters who are sticking with him through thick or thin, even when that means condemning so many people to a terrible pandemic and economic collapse.
VBM. So how do we protect?
VBM, vote by mail. Yeah, so this is going to, a lot is going to depend in November on vote by mail. So one of the things we've been working on at Demos is a bunch of policy ideas and advocacy campaigns in the states and litigation to try to protect vote by mail. There are a couple of things that I would highlight for folks. Number one, it's going to be really, really important to make sure that we loosen some of the restrictions on how vote by mail operates, right? So, you know, they have, a lot of states have, for example, signature verification policies and postmark deadlines that are actually really punitive and mean that a lot of ballots may not get counted properly. So we need to open up those restrictions, and that's really an issue for state legislatures. So, you know, whatever state you are that you're listening in, it'd be really important for state secretaries of state and state legislatures to open up their vote by mail policies. That's number one. Number two is we need to make sure that everyone actually gets a mail-in ballot. Even now, you have a lot of states that are fighting over this idea of, you know, should we send ballots to people? When should we send them? Maybe we'll only send it to some people, right? In the middle of a pandemic, everybody should get access to a mail-in ballot if they
Now,
want.
Sabeel, we only have 7 weeks left.
Absolutely. So at this point now, it's going to become really critical for people to do their part, not depending on the government, but, you know, make sure you're registered, make sure you've got your ballot. You know, there's lots of resources online to sort of help kind of confirm, and depending on your locality, what the policies are and what the deadlines are. But I would encourage people to not wait for election day. The election is basically happening now, right? Ballots are starting to be mailed. Make sure you're registered, make sure you're getting your ballot, make sure you submit your ballot early so that it actually gets there in time and gets counted. And then the last thing I would say too is people should be prepared for not election day, but election month.
Right.
We will not know the results on November 4th. It's very unlikely that we will have a full tabulation by the day after the election. It's going to be very important that we let all the ballots be counted before calling the election.
Let me tell you, Sabeel, what I'm really hoping for is that, and you know, I just have this gut feeling that the country is going to have a switch. That sooner than later, and they're going to say, "Do I really want to put up with this?" And that things are not going to be as tight as we think they are going to be. I mean, it's a hope. I mean, if all the
Yeah.
work that you do is successful in getting people to participate and get busy with their civic duty, I think a switch. That's just a personal opinion. I think a switch is going to occur. Now, tell me a little bit about how COVID-19 has really exposed what we must call racial capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, the COVID crisis is. I mean, I really hope you're right about November. You know, I'm an optimist at heart too, so I do think that we're going to see a change of course. But the COVID crisis is a good reason for why that's so desperately needed, right?
Right.
What we're seeing with COVID is it's actually preying upon all the already existing inequities of our economy. So we think about, you know, who are the essential workers who are keeping everyone housed and fed and alive, but also putting their lives at risk just to keep food on the table. These are predominantly Black and brown workers, women workers, right, who are staffing the, or who are kind of like staffing in our agriculture systems, in our retail environments. And these workers were always vulnerable and precarious, right, with low pay, not poor access to healthcare, not an inadequate safety net. And so what COVID has done is made that insecurity even more dangerous, even worse, because of the collapse and the pandemic. So when we say that COVID is a sign of the deeper structural problems of our economy, those are the kinds of things that we're thinking about. That if we invest in an equitable and inclusive economy that works for everybody, then we would actually be better able to weather these types of crises, right? Because if people didn't have to worry about access to healthcare, about their making their debt payments, about having affordable housing, for just to name three examples, right? We could survive a momentary crisis, but what's happening with this crisis is that it's now we're in a situation now where we have 40 million plus Americans who are at risk of being evicted and homeless because now we're in the third month where they can't make their rent payments. And these are predominantly working class Black and brown Americans. That's because they were already housing insecure because of our housing affordability crisis.
Now, Sabeel, first of all, your work is so important, and making those statements are so important because there are two ways to spin what's going on right now, right? The other way that many on the right are attempting to spin that more people of color are the ones dying from this disease, they would want to spin it as irresponsible behaviors, as opposed to it being a systemic problem. your your narrative is so important to get out there so that that doesn't cauterize into the minds of many, because already, you know, uh, the they're this way because they're lazy, they're this way because they eat unhealthy, they're this way,
Yeah,
when that is really something across the board. And so I think it is so important that you've actually created the appropriate and correct narrative, that this is racial capitalism that is creating this particular problem in the deaths that we're seeing.
totally. And that personal responsibility narrative is part of that racist system that tries to blame individuals for what is actually the result of the policies that have been put in place, by Democrats and Republicans, to be honest, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there was a study in the New York Times this weekend showing conclusively showing how the COVID death rates and vulnerability rates are higher in areas with greater air pollution, that have a history of greater air
Yes.
pollution. Now, those are the same neighborhoods where these are predominantly Black and brown neighborhoods where, because of the way our cities have been zoned and built for the last 30 years, we put the coal plant where, in a
Not in
neighborhood
my
where,
backyard.
not
Yeah.
in my backyard, exactly. And as a result, for a long time, people of color have higher asthma rates, higher incidences of heart disease, higher exposure to air pollution, and now we're seeing that that's also causing higher risk to COVID, right? It's that 30 years worth of policies that we're paying the price for now.
That is so important. It's good that you put that out there. Okay, we're coming close to the end, so I want to talk about something important that you call our moment of a third moment of radical progressive American reconstruction. Talk to me.
Yeah, so we talked earlier about how this country was not founded to really be an inclusive democracy, and when I think about our history, I also think about those moments where we have actually fought to expand the meaning of democracy in a powerful and inspiring way. And so the first of those moments was Reconstruction after the Civil War, where we finally removed slavery from the Constitution, created what was then the high watermark of Black political power and inclusion, right, in the 1860s. The backlash to that stopped the first Reconstruction, from achieving its full potential. The second Reconstruction, I think of as the Civil Rights Movement, right? In the 60s, we created the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. John Lewis marched, and we have these heroes of the Civil Rights Movement who really, once again, tried to expand the meaning of American democracy to include Black and brown people as full members with equal dignity. I think the fight we're in now, the reason this moment feels so fraught is because we're actually in the middle of a third Reconstruction, where the real issue is and just like in those other two previous moments, it's really about who is this democracy for? Is this going to be a multiracial, inclusive democracy where Black, brown, indigenous, people of color are full, fair, and equal members of the democracy? Or is this going to be a backlash against that idea, trying to hoard the fruits of the country for whiter and wealthier communities? That's the fork in the road. And the president is explicit about which side he's on. But the reason I'm optimistic is I think we're sort of confronting these deeper systems so openly. We're seeing them so openly now in this COVID moment, in this Trump moment, that if we can win in November and actually make the systemic changes that we're talking about in our conversation, I think we're actually can inaugurate a whole different phase of democracy that we've never had before, that is much more inclusive, much more responsive, and actually meets the needs of our communities. And to me, that's exciting. There is an upside on the other side of all of this that I think if we win, we can really achieve something important.
Sabeel, and I don't even think that is pie in the sky. I actually believe that. That's why I do what I do. That's why you do what you do. Sabeel, is there something that you would have liked me to ask you that I hadn't asked you?
No, this is a great conversation, and so grateful for the space that you've curated here. I know this show is such an important part of the conversation. One thing I'd love for folks to also just keep in mind, right, is that we need everybody to show up in November, but also to show up beyond November, right? Join the groups in your community, add the pressure to your voice to your local, pressuring your local electeds at the state, city, and federal levels, right? This project of building a democracy that we just talked about is going to take the next 5, 10, 15 years. It's doable, but it will require all of us. And so I just hope that everyone who is nervous and anxious and worried in this moment, that we can channel that productively to vote in November, but then to stay engaged and continue the fight beyond it.
Sabeel Rahman, president of Demos and author of Civic Power, Rebuilding American Democracy in an Era of Crisis. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Thanks so much for having me. This was great.
Hey folks, I hope you enjoyed Sabeel. Let me tell you something. First of all, I love the discussion I'm having with my two right wingers, both Tank 28 and Masticator. Masticator has an interesting thing that he said, and I want everybody to listen to this answer. Masticator, I just put out that there's a new poll out of Monmouth in Florida, 49-44 for Biden ahead by 5. I think that is beyond the polls error, whatever the margin of error. Anyhow, so Masticator comes back with a very good answer. He says, Egberto, laughing out loudly, so cute after 2016, you still maintain your faith in polls. You are a true believer. To which I want to tell you, and I get tired of all these people, on our side, when I say on our side, progressives as well, that are so mad at the pollsters for 2016. The polls were not wrong. The polls were not, and I've been preaching this from before it ended. From before Hillary Clinton lost the Electoral College, I've been stating this. The polls were not wrong. The polls came in within the margin of error. And if a poll comes within the margin of error, it is not wrong. It's so important that we understand that. Now, it was so easy to say, oh, the polls were wrong and all of that in these states. Look, Hillary Clinton lost because she didn't make sure to exceed the poll. In other words, if Hillary wanted to absolutely win, she had to exceed the poll. In other words, she had to get out of the poll's margin of error. Black people and women, in whenever it comes to polling, the margin of error is a dangerous spot to be in. And the reason why is people's carnal fears, their carnality comes out. And when they're a little bit iffy at that ballot box, they go with what is comfortable. That is just human nature. So anytime if you're a woman and you're running for something, the only way you know that you likely have the game is if you're beating the polls margin of error. Period. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of people that go in there, men or women, will go into that booth. And when they're doing this kind of stuff like that, they then go ahead and think, oh, well, I'm within the margin of error. Now, when it comes to Biden, now let me tell you, Masticator, if all the polls in these states that are the electoral college states, the swing states, look like it's within the margin of error, and let's say even if Biden is ahead in every single one of them and it's within the margin of error, at that point I will be cautious. And why will I be cautious? Because I know there are a lot of other factors in there. There are factors like the voter suppression, and there are all kinds of things that people are going to try to suppress the vote or not to get the vote in, or if we have 2 or 3% machinations with the vote, then we got a problem. Now, if I see that Biden is ahead in Wisconsin by 5 points in a +2 poll, if I see Biden is ahead in Michigan by 4 points and it's a +2, and it plus or -2, and if I see Biden is ahead in Pennsylvania by 5 and it's a +or -2, I'm going to say, if Biden doesn't win, there's something wrong with the way, with the thing. But what I'm saying, the polls in 2016 were not wrong. Look at my articles at Daily Kos, where I stated exactly what Trump was likely going to do with the triangulation, etc. So it's important that we not look at just we don't look at what, the common, what do they call it? Whatever they call it, anyhow. Folks, we are coming at the end of the program, and not to mention downright cheating with the machines. Now, Christine Park, that is what scares me the most when it comes to these, because that is a dangerous part of our democracy. We have been used to these machines, right? We've been used to these machines with no audit trails. And when you have machines with no audit trails, that becomes a problem. I think what we need to do later, as we gain more power, we have to have all machines with audit trails so that when you're done voting, there's a clip of paper that you get that you can see what your votes are, and that you take that clip of paper and you put it into a safety box. And that nobody has to count that safety box unless it beats the poll, unless the polls are not realized. Then you go ahead and say, we got to go through and do all that kind of stuff. Yeah, if you voted 200 times, it would be a felony. Anyway, folks, I want to say hi to all my people. Tank28, welcome aboard. Michael Rudden, welcome aboard. Christine Park, welcome aboard. Masticator, welcome aboard. Thank you guys for all being here. Bridge MCP. Let's see. Bruce Pollard. Let's see. I'm scrolling up to my people. Let's see who else is here. Kathy Pascal, welcome aboard. Who else is here? Let's see. I call it Jamie Miller Boggs. Welcome aboard. I'll read those things afterwards. I got Bridge already. Let's see who else is here. Had quite a few that I missed. I got Jamie already. Para ver. ¿Quién más está aquí? Okay, if I missed you, forgive me, okay? But I'd like to call you out because I'm just happy that you guys are all here. Let's see who else I forgot. Christine Park, welcome aboard. Who else is here? I'm scrolling real fast. We passed Jacoby G, welcome aboard as well. Let's see. I'm scrolling fast. Paulette Stansel, welcome aboard. Okay, AVQ, welcome aboard. If I missed you, forgive me. And we're getting to the end of the program right now, so I will need to do my pitch really quick. Folks, please go ahead and get my book. I ask you so kindly, get my book. By getting my book, you're not only getting some good stuff, good ideas, but you're also supporting Politics Done Right. You're making sure that we can stay alive. Also, please consider doing one of two things. Those of you who are listening to us inside of YouTube right now, please go ahead and subscribe there. Just click the join button, $1.99. Join button. If we can get several, gracias por estar aquí, Jacoby. If we can just get several people joining us at $1.99, hundreds, thousands of that, we can actually get this stuff done right. The same thing applies to our Patreon. Let me put our Patreon on the screen. That is politicsdoneright.com/Patreon. And you can, if you want to provide us support via PayPal, that is politicsdoneright.com/PayPal. Thank you so kindly, Brige. As if you want to support us through YouTube, I'm going to put the YouTube link there for those of you not sitting at YouTube right now. You can join us for $1.99 at YouTube right there. And don't forget, visit our store. And by the way, if you take a look at our YouTube channel, there are T-shirts and face masks and cups and all of that we have under our thing there under YouTube. So please consider doing that as well. Here is the link for our store, politicsdoneright.com/store. But of course, you can buy it directly off of YouTube as well. We need all the support we can get to keep doing what we do. We appreciate you. You know that you could be anywhere else. Thank you so kindly for being here. My name is Egberto Willies, and you know how I end this baby. Goes something like this. I am out. Come on, where's my thing? Okay, looks like I'm gone. Okay, I am out. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.